Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh. So this is one of the presentations from the Embodiment Conference. So I guess many of you know the Embodiment Conference was a huge event over 2 weeks where over 140 speakers led presentations on embodiment. Now, a lot of these were visual. Some of them were more kind of talking based though. We thought, you know what, we could give some of these away as part of the podcast. So listening to this, you may hear references to questions or things in the chat. We've tried to select ones that they're not demonstrating too much visually, obviously. If it piques your interest, you can always see, you can always buy the full package of Embodiment Conference recordings. It's a bit of an encyclopedia, actually. Embodiment Netflix, someone was calling it. And that is available if you just Google the Embodiment Conference. I'm sure you'll be able to find a link to that. This is one of the speakers, and as I say, it's a bit different. May or may not be me interviewing them, presenting it. It's mostly them just doing their thing, and excuse the sort of occasional references to comments or visual demonstrations. And it just seemed like a lot of the speakers were extremely kind of high-level people, and it is stuff we wanted to make available. So here it is.
My name is Miles Kessler. I am one of the guest hosts for this conference. Mark Walsh has put this on, and his team have asked me to help out where I can within my busy schedule. So I'm very happy to be here today, and I'm especially happy to be here today with Wendy Palmer, Sensei. I've done a few of these online thingies with Wendy already, and it's quite special. And maybe before I pass it to you, Wendy, I'll just read a brief introduction. So I think that most people in the embodiment world already kind of have a good idea of who you are, but just in case, Wendy Palmer is the creator of Leadership Embodiment, a profound approach to personal and professional development through embodiment practices. She has been teaching classes and workshops in conscious embodiment around the world for over 30 years. Wendy is also a 6th-degree black belt in the martial art of Aikido, and she's the author of 3 books: Leadership Embodiment, How the Way We Sit and Stand Can Change the Way We Think and Speak, The Intuitive Body, Discovering the Wisdom of Conscious Embodiment, and Aikido and the Practice of Freedom, Aikido Principles as a Spiritual Guide. And I have known Wendy, like I said, I've known of Wendy for years, decades, in fact, but I've known Wendy for a couple of years because she's participated in a few of my online offerings. And what has always touched me with Wendy's work is, there's something. There was a Japanese samurai Zen master named Isai Chosanshi, and he said something about mastery and dregs. And for those non-native English speakers, dregs are like the leftovers. Like when you make coffee, in a barista, when you make coffee and they extract the coffee, the part that's left over, the grinds, they throw that in the trash. Those are called the dregs. And this Zen master, this samurai Zen master, Isai Chosanshi, he said that the mark of a true master is according to this, that they can take the dregs of the ancients and extract clear liquid. And that's something that's always impressed me with Wendy. She's definitely out there on the leading edge and creating her own practices, but she also has one foot is firmly in the lineage of Aikido, and she has this beautiful way of taking the forms and the dregs of the past and extracting clear liquid. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you the noble, the awesome, the shiny, Wendy Palmer.
Thank you, Miles. That was very sweet, very cute. Thank you for the kind words.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm delighted to speak with you all tonight because I love sharing this material because it's made such a difference in my life. It's helped me to be able to manage my reactive self and to find more lightness and brightness and pass that on. So the leadership embodiment model, as Miles said, has been informed by 2 wisdom traditions, primarily Aikido and mindfulness. And in leadership embodiment, we work with the body because it's a shortcut. And when I'm in organizations, people love to hear that. And we say it's a shortcut because our experience shows up in our body before it comes to our conscious awareness. And we say that because small children and animals know before we know when we're mad, sad, glad, or afraid. That means our experience shows up in our body, and we could have been stressed for 10 seconds, 2 minutes, or as one client said, 2 years before we realize that we're stressed. And the thing about when we are triggered is that we tend to tighten up, and when we tighten up, we release cortisol. And cortisol shuts down the part of the brain that governs big picture thinking, creativity, innovation, connection. So it's really fairly straightforward. If we change our muscle groups, we can actually change the chemicals that are being released in our body, which changes our brain. So that's why it's a shortcut. And instead of trying to sort ourselves out through our understanding, what we do in leadership embodiment is we actually change the muscle groups, and we change the process that the form that we're using in our body. So if we can fire extensor muscles, if we sit up, if we open up, if we extend out, a little testosterone gets released. And that activates the part of the brain that governs big picture thinking, creativity, innovation, and risk-taking. Testosterone on its own can be annoying because it can be a little pushy, as we know. So what we want to activate is oxytocin. Oxytocin, I call it the connector hormone. And we do that in this model by taking a few seconds to think of something that makes us smile. So if we all do that for a few seconds, just think of something that really makes you want to smile. I know what Miles is thinking about. his little ones. That warm feeling that you're getting is oxytocin. So the idea is that we want to balance a cocktail, a combination of testosterone and oxytocin, and we'd like to minimize the cortisol that is coming through our system. So in order to study ourselves further, what we're going to do in leadership embodiment, I'm going to make a distinction between two parts of ourselves. One part I call personality, and it's very similar to ego, only ego is a complex term. So personality is the part of us that references on trying to create security in our life. And in leadership embodiment, we say the strategies are control, approval, and at a core level, safety. I myself am a head type, and so I am big on control, but I don't want you to think I'm a control freak, but I need more control. If I'm in approval, I want you to like me, but not too much, because then that's too much, and like me a little bit more. So these strategies take a lot of energy to maintain at the proper level. And while we're trying to maintain security, we're not really free for creativity. We're not really free for possibility and living into our potential. The good news is we have a whole nother part of us that we refer to in this model as our centered self. In this model, center is not a place in your body. It's a state of being. And it's a state of being that most of us have touched into when we've experienced what's often called the zone or the flow state. That is, when I'm doing an activity, I begin to fatigue, I back off a little bit, and suddenly it becomes effortless or easy. In the flow state, perhaps I'm working on writing a paper or something for my book. It might be people in organizations working on a project. They get stuck. They'll step away, have tea, get coffee, come back. It starts to flow. So our interest in facilitating people in this work is how do we give them the tools to move more quickly from our personality, which is our reactive self, to our centered self, which is our resourceful self. And we also don't use the term transformation in this model because our feeling is that we're actually going to always be triggered, personality will be activated, and then we can move to center. And so we use the infinity sign. There's a sense of pulsing between these parts of ourselves because we're both. As far as I'm concerned, I've never met anyone who stays centered. If anyone tells me they do, I'd like to spend a few minutes with them. I'm not buying it. It's all in the recovery. It's all in the connecting back. And also accepting our reactive self because it's our humanity. So moving further on, we work with 3 leadership competencies when we're teaching the coaching to people. The first one is inclusiveness. It's the message we're in this together. It's not just the rhetoric, it's the felt sense that we're in this together. We have some neuroscience to discuss what leadership presence is. The second leadership competency is centered listening, listening without taking criticism personally. And the last one is speaking up, advocating without being aggressive, really taking a stand for what we believe in, whether people agree with us or not. So in this little talk, I'm going to touch on the first two, inclusiveness, and then we'll do a little exercise with centered listening as well. So the whole notion of inclusiveness is that neuroscience has coined this term called a peripersonal space. And what neuroscience says is that the brain maps everything within our reach as us. Depending on your culture, it's closer in or further away. But the brain thinks that this is me. My brain also maps my family as me. So I can talk to them halfway across the world and they're in my personal space. But if I go to the store, that person becomes other. If I go to a meeting, those people become other. I like them. I'm friendly with them. They're not in my personal space. They're not part of me. So it's my experience when I see the great leaders who've been able to make tremendous impact in the world. My belief is that their brain actually maps the team, their organization, or in extreme cases, their country as them. I'm in South Africa at this time, and Nelson Mandela is one of my heroes. And I believe that Nelson Mandela mapped his country as part of him. Even people who hated him were still part of him. And I think he was able to be a very strong influence because of that. I believe that Martin Luther King and Gandhi did the same. Even people who hated them, who wished them ill, they mapped them as part of them. So to do that, we have to practice expanding our personal space. Normally it's a bubble that's around us or it connects to our family. And we do that with our concentration. So as you sit right now, you can expand your personal space by looking at the corners of whatever room you're in or out the window if you're, and you actually imagine that you're pushing your bubble, which the personal space is like a bubble, out so that it touches those corners and touches the ceiling. And then for a moment, see if you can just concentrate on the space and connect to it. So the space is not empty. That's something very interesting for my experience on how I developed leadership embodiment, whether it's Aikido on the mat or in real life. Space is actually filled with flow, with life force, with energies. And I like to invite archetypes into the space. So the idea is in leadership embodiment, and the reason this talk is entitled Coaching from the Outside In, we don't actually initially go inside and try to sort ourselves out. It's my experience that inside me is Pandora's box. And although I have compassion and I have confidence and so on, I immediately connect to guilt and shame and resentment and a lot of things when I go inside. So we use the part of ourselves that lies outside of our skin to connect to, because our experience is that's, I'm going to use the word cleaner and more resilient. And what I do is I imbue that part of myself that's out here, because neuroscience has clarified that we don't end at our skin. We actually extend beyond that. We can feel each other across the room. Sometimes we can feel each other through the video in a conference like this. So what I do is I imbue the personal space with archetypes. And I'm going to talk about some of the well-known ones that I use. When I feel I need more wisdom, because my mind is getting tight, I invite the Dalai Lama. And when I invite the Dalai Lama, I suddenly, because I've been around him, I've had the great fortune, and I remember that feeling, and it changes my experience of myself. I'm a very reactive person. I have a lot of Irish in me. I'm very quick to have a hot temper. And so when I react, especially driving, because driving gets me, I invite Mother Teresa. And immediately I can go from, oh, you're an idiot, to, oh, be careful. Because if I think of Mother Teresa, her response would be careful to the driver, not you're an idiot. And when I need more confidence, I invite either O-Sensei, the founder of Aikido, or Nelson Mandela. And when I think of either of them, I just feel a little bit more capacity to take action. So this is an invitation for those of you watching to consider who you might invite to connect to give you a little boost. And you can just do one archetype. It doesn't have to be a person. It could be something from nature. It could be, we have clients who use their animals. I have several clients. They're sort of Silicon Valley clients, very intense all the time, working, and they're very serious and they're very critical. But both these clients will say their dogs give them unconditional love. Whenever they come home, their dogs are always happy to see them. And when they think about their dogs, I watch their face lights up. And for a moment, they're not sort of burdened with that heavy cloud of criticism or feeling like they must do it. They lighten up. And when they lighten up, they have more access to creativity and possibility. So the whole idea of inclusiveness is we not only include others, we include them with qualities that allow them to feel more appreciated, more resourceful, more connected to. We cultivate our warmth. And so right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us through a little exercise, and then I'll have a Q&A. So you have a little idea of experiencing what I've been talking about. So what I'd like us all to do is close and cross and tighten up a little bit, maybe hunch over, and think of something that happened recently that was annoying, not horrible, or just frustrating. And we'll all go there for 8 seconds. That's just, for 8 seconds, just relive that unpleasant experience. Okay, everybody stop. I'm sure some of us got there in 2 seconds. I certainly did. I'm going to coach us into a different energetic state. So I'd like us to sit up a little straighter. You can push your hips back in the chair if that helps. And we're going to work with the breath as up and down instead of in and out. And what I'd like us to do is we inhale is lengthen your spine and think up out the top of your heads. And as you exhale, soften your chest, breathe down, and think of something that makes you smile. And then do it one more time. As you inhale, a dignified, uplifted posture. As you exhale, softening your chest, thinking of something that makes you smile. Nice. Now with your eyes, see a point on the far wall or out the window if you have such a good fortune to see that view. And then push your personal space out there, and then push your personal space out to the left and right and behind you and above you. And then invite one of your, we call them euphemistically a posse member, but one of your archetypes, and just take a few seconds and feel what it would be like to connect to that energy. Now, think of that event again. And as you think about it, notice if it's different at all or your perception of the situation was different. Was it different for anyone?
So yeah, if anybody wants to share how that exercise worked. Okay, here's a hand. Harmonic, your mic is open.
Awesome. I felt a little bit more gratitude for what my challenging situation. I just felt a little bit more grateful for it.
That's wonderful.
Like higher energy.
Yeah, it's nice that it shifted that. That's great. Very nice to hear. Thank you.
Gratitude's important for those things that we have and for the things that we don't have, I find. Like if you have gratitude for things that you want but don't have, like having that gratitude for not having things, it makes a day a little easier sometimes.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Beautiful. And somebody's hand was up, but it just went down. They disappeared. If you want to raise your hand, do it again. I can share mine while we're waiting for there he is. So just mine quickly was, I had a kind of a frustrating situation. Then as I did the process, I connected with my meditation teacher, the Buddha as well. And then there was just a sense of unshakability. And when I did this one, I was in the problem. When I did the other one, the problem was a minor thing that was within me.
Yeah.
So, Anik Schurman, your mic is open.
Well, it's a bit of the same with you. for me, the frustration was first in my body, and it took me really down in seconds. And then when I did the exercise, I was in a light bubble more, and the situation was outside of me and far away from me. So it's nice.
That's great. Yeah, we get a little distance from it, I think.
Yeah.
There's one more hand, Wendy. Do you want to try that one?
Yeah, let's go ahead. Why not?
Okay, Amani.
Hi. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Gigi. Hi. I'm calling from Brazil. For me, it was interesting because I wasn't sure who did I want to invite. And so I let it just open to sort of like what appears. And it was a sort of like a regal, royal queen type of archetype energy. And it was interesting because I realized that's what I actually wanted or needed, some sort of like assuring, confident, grounded energy. And my body just decided, what it was going to be and gave it to me. It was really cool.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Very nice. So the principle that we've been working with is that I coached us into a different energetic pattern, and it actually changed our perception. It's very difficult to change our mind with our mind. That has been my experience. I can try to tell myself, don't worry, it's okay. And that's because my body is still running that cortisol or that energy. If I can actually change the chemicals in my body, my brain changes. So the whole idea of uplifting, of opening, of expanding, and thinking of something that makes us smile puts us into a different energetic state and actually changes the chemicals. And my experience is it won't last. The point is not that it lasts. The point is that I've been able to shift temporarily, and then I'll react again, and then I'll shift again. And so you can do it quite easily. I took a longer time coaching us, but you can do a shorter version. You can just uplift, straighten up. You can look out and expand out, even extend your arms out a little bit. And then you can just soften and settle and think of something that makes you smile. Even that simple little exercise will start to shift your state, and it'll change your perception of the situation. When we get impacted, we get a voicemail, an email, somebody looks at us, our own inner critic comes up. There's that tightening again. And we can acknowledge it and say, yes, look, there it is. And then I can take another breath and I can inhale, lighten up, exhale, soften. As I think of something that makes me smile, expand out a little bit, and then settle. And also in this model, what's different than many other embodiment approaches is that we don't focus on getting grounded. I know that sounds like heresy, but it's not our thing. In Aikido, I don't focus on getting grounded either. And I'll explain to you why. If I get grounded, if I tell myself be grounded, I'll put my weight down. If I put my weight down, I become heavy. If I become heavy, the feeling that I start to communicate is heavy. And then the quality of our conversation will be heavy. We work quite a bit in organizations, tech and biotech in the Silicon Valley, and people have to have difficult conversations. Also on the Aikido mat, I have some guys in my school who are half my age and twice my size. And if I put my weight down, they'll put their weight down. And they're bigger and stronger than I am, then it's going to be harder. If I lighten up, if I open up the way, if you've ever taken a yoga class and you go to stand on one foot, you pick up the other foot, your system will send energy up to stabilize. The idea in leadership embodiment is that we want a balance, perfect balance, ideally, between centrifugal force, which goes upward, and gravitational force, which goes downward. So the Earth is spinning approximately 1,000 miles an hour. That would tend to fling things off of it. That's centrifugal force. We don't have to manufacture it. It's just there. We can just enjoy that upliftedness. And then there's gravity. If we have a nice balance, then we can be strong and light instead of being tough and stable and grounded and trying to grip the earth. So also in our conversations and when we're centering, we emphasize the uplift to create a sense of lightness, and then a softening without gripping the ground. And two of my heroes, one is the Dalai Lama and the other is Desmond Tutu. I don't know. There's a wonderful book called The Book of Joy, which I recommend to everybody if you haven't read it. It's just lovely. It's them having conversations and teasing each other. Both of them do this very interesting thing when somebody asks them a question that's very heavy about suffering or torture or something like that. Both of them will give a little giggle. I don't know if you've ever seen them interviewed. And that's their way of making the situation light, and then they answer it. Because when people are more light and open, they're more receptive. When people are heavier and more grounded, they tend to be less receptive. There tend to be a sense of, I'm here, I know what's right, I'm going to do it. So I know this is very different than many embodiment practices, and I've found that it's made a huge difference in my life to use this sense of lightness as a place of power and stability. Instead of telling myself and telling everyone, get grounded, I actually give the instruction, uplift, lighten up, soften, open. And that's because we're not stabilizing on the ground. We're actually stabilizing on the space. What I talked about before, all those archetypes in the space, the idea is they support me. So I don't feel like I have to grip the ground for myself. I'm supported by the energy around me. And when I'm in that state, people tend to be more receptive to what I have to say than when I'm in this kind of, okay, I know what's right and I'm going to tell you and I've got a lot of experience. That's a bit of a heavier feeling. So I'm just curious if there are any questions at this point before I go on to another piece.
Well, there is a question that just came up on the chat. If somebody else has a question, you can raise your hand, but I'll read the chat first. So again, you can raise your hand electronically. Aaron, I guess, says, is there a line drawn between the posse member, the archetype, the posse member's responsibility for action and our own action? In other words, does thinking of someone else responding reduce the reward we felt from us finding a way to overcome the issue? Does that make sense to you, that last part?
Yeah, it makes perfect. I see exactly what he's pointing to. I think I see anyway.
Yeah.
So here's the deal. In leadership embodiment, what we're trying to do is not self-generate. I know that sounds crazy, but we want it to come through us. Our attitude is we're a conduit for wisdom, for compassion. We're a conduit for this sense of empowerment. Rather than, I am wise, I am compassionate, I am strong, I can do this, and I'm good because of that. That's not our view. That's personality commandeering spiritual practice, in my view. We call it spiritual materialism. I'm trying to achieve something for myself. In leadership embodiment, I view myself as porous, as a conduit. And I open myself so wisdom can come through me, compassion can come through me, confidence can come through me. That way, I find I'm less attached to the outcome. If I don't do it, then I don't have to be attached to the outcome. And I don't have so much need to try to achieve something. I can open myself. So you're right. There will be less internal reward. To me, there's a larger reward knowing that I can serve rather than I've achieved something.
Beautiful. Well, there's another hand here. When he just came up, it's from Laura. Hi, Laura, your mic's open.
Hi. I'm wondering about working with like children and little girls. I work with a lot of kids in dance that are classically trained and bringing them to somatics. And I find sometimes the lack of grounding, like I'm just thinking about, it's different when you're working in a corporate environment to not win, and people that have maybe excessive yin or more female energy. Do we still go with lightness and use that as the strength?
I mean,
that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
That's my question.
My bias would be to find a good balance between, my spiritual practice, I call it heaven and earth. In corporate, I call it centrifugal and gravitational. Obviously, I can't say heaven and earth in corporate. But I still, myself, think that the importance is a balance. And I see with children, they have lots of up energy, lots of sort of reaching up and opening, and then we go to school, and then we go to college, and then we go to work. And this sort of heavy cloud in the ceiling comes on. So I would still encourage them to have lots of bright, shiny energy, and also a connection to the earth. So from my view, I would go for balance between the two. Not that we can always get it, but ideal would be 50-50. I don't know if that helps, but that would just be my view.
That was great. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Laura. We got one more hand up. Wendy, do you want to take another question or another comment?
Yeah.
Great. So it's Harmonic. Harmonic is back with us. Hi, Harmonic.
Hi, guys. So I'm a massage therapist, and I just have some questions. When I find myself being porous, it almost feels as if I tie a piece of myself to my client, and as they walk away, I unravel a little bit. And I feel like sometimes it might be because I'm too high up, and other times I'm too low down. How do you suggest to find that balance point when working with somebody else's energy?
Well, my suggestion is, and again, it's my bias, that you take the attitude you're not doing it. So there's no way that a piece of you can unravel because it comes through you. You're part of something bigger. You invite it to come through you. Just like when we're in the zone, people will report, I wasn't doing it. It was coming through me.
Okay.
So therefore, if I'm not attached to that person, if I don't have my hook in, when they leave, it doesn't pull the line.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to listen without taking it personally, and we'll do a little exercise with that. And then you can go into maybe break out and go into some discussions if you like. So now that we've established that the space has resources and that it's not empty, but it's actually something we can use, because of the nature of the situation, I'll have us work with our own inner critic. You could certainly do this with a criticism someone has given you or a criticism you think someone might give you. In this case, you could work with a criticism you've given yourself. So I'm going to demonstrate. And like we did in the first exercise, I'm going to tighten up. I'm going to go into my personality's embodied pattern, which is crossed and closed and a little bit low and heavy. And I'm going to say to myself, which is a criticism I give myself, Wendy, you've been working on this new book for 2 years. I don't see a lot of good progress. I think you're just procrastinating. And that's very typical of me. And then I feel a little bit of guilt and shame and a little irritation, and it's very indicative. So first you'll all do that and then just notice it. To get the most from this exercise, it helps if you exaggerate a little bit. In other words, when I'm closing, I tighten a little more than I might normally. That'll just help trigger all of that part of my personality. Once I've noticed that, now I'm going to change up. Okay, let's do this. So everybody just do that. Everyone who's on the call, come up with a criticism you give yourself. Close and tighten. And then say that criticism to yourself, and just kind of, it should feel familiar, and you should, it's likely you might have some negative emotional reaction to yourself. Okay, let's stop because I think we all got there pretty quickly. Most of us do anyway with self-criticism. Once again, let's go into a different state. So sit up straighter again. This time as you inhale up, try to imagine there's a little clouds between your vertebrae, so your vertebrae actually lengthen. And if you can try this, if you're watching, this is kind of fun. Touch the top of your head with your hand, and then pop your hand up like this, straight up above your head, and feel how your energy pops up and lightens up. Now as you exhale, soften and think of something that makes you smile. And do it one more time. Inhale, a little bit upliftedness in the spine, a lightness. And as you exhale, breathe down, soften, think of something that makes you smile. Once again, extend your personal space out. Look out the window or look to the corners of the room. And you could even take your arms, and reach them out a little bit. Just have a feeling of extending and opening. We're exaggerating a little, but it won't hurt to really expand yourself out. Nice. Now see if you can think of an archetype that you can imagine would handle criticism with a little more grace. I would often use Nelson Mandela. In my imagination, he's someone who would be graceful in the face of criticism. Doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's just, could be anything, could be a movie character or whatever. Okay, and now that you've done that, what I'd like you to do is look in front of you and find a spot either on the desk in front of you or in the room in front of you. And I'm going to have you say the words to yourself and put them out there in that spot and look at them. So I'm going to say the words to myself about my book. I'm going to say, Wendy, you've been working on this for 2 years. I don't think that you're making much progress. I think you're procrastinating. And then I'm going to put those words out there. I'm going to look at them. So they're at a distance now, and I'm in a different state. And as I look at them, I have, for myself, quite a different reaction to it. I think, yeah, that's right. I have been taking a lot of time. And actually, I'm going to use this moment where my inner critic gave to me to give me a little bit more of a boost to, let's see if you can put a little more time in and find time during the day to spend some time doing it. So I had a very different reaction to my own inner critic when I was in this different state of being.
Great. So I'm going to encourage you to raise your hand electronically because we can't see all the windows. Down at the bottom, there's a participants button. Click it. You'll get a window. You'll get a drop-down menu on the side, and click your hand up. And we are waiting patiently to hear all of your amazing feedback and or questions. Now we'll go to Manal. Manal, your mic is open.
Hi, Wendy. It's lovely to see you again. And it's a great reminder for what I learned about, 2 years ago. And I'm quite tempted now. It's like, I want to do level 2, but I can hear you speak for the rest of the night and tomorrow as well. I'm grateful to have this opportunity. So it's just a comment and saying it's lovely to see you, not a very much of a request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Manal. And we'll go to Megan. Megan Smith Hurley, I think. Megan, your mic should be open.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Did I get your name right?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So just a quick question. I'd love to hear another tidbit of how these practices look with the client one-on-one, like another example of how sessions with you might look.
Well, yeah, I'll try to make a really quick one because that's a whole process in itself.
Yeah.
What we do with the client is instead of doing intake and what is your leadership challenge or what is your challenge, we come in and we say, look, we're going to download this methodology to you in 2 sessions. Once you have it, once you've learned how to center, be inclusive, be able to work with criticism in a skillful way, and then we have the advocating, the triangle, speaking up. Then what we do is we say, now we're going to we'll do intake. What is your leadership challenge? What do you want to work with? Because when a client starts to tell a story and derail, we can stop them and we say, okay, let's do centering together. So let's stop from it. Let's both inhale up, exhale down. We always do it with them. Mm-hmm. Okay, now let's continue with what you have to say. And always, it's amazing, they have a different perspective. They're less emotional, less reactive, and more able to see a way forward. So that's why we download the methodology. It's in a lot of it's in my latest book, and if you go to the website, you can see a lot of stuff. But we do that first, and then we go to more of a traditional coaching, which is how are you doing? What do you want to work on? So that's the difference.
Thank you so much. Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. I'm just going to read a question before we go to, you've got 3 more hands up, but I'll just read one here. It says, I'd love to read something along these lines, Wendy. What can I read and where can I look? Do you have any suggestions for that is Anto?
My latest book, my latest book is Leadership Embodiment, and you can go to the website, leadershipembodiment.com, and there's lots of stuff on it. Videos, Vimeos, there's an online platform you can join and take a little course. It's all there. So this idea of archetypes in leadership embodiment, we euphemistically call it our posse. And we really encourage you to get your posse up and running. And you can have thousands of beings or people in your posse. You can have 1, 3. The more you look for inspiration, the more inspiration will show up for you. So you can look for inspiration through nature, in people. A lot of people use superheroes. We have these little posse cards that we give out in all of our presentations and courses. And we have Wonder Woman is one of the posse cards. So the idea is that we have these capacities. We often see them outside of ourselves. So if we connect to them, we can bring them through. And the Aikido mat, I bring my Aikido teachers through me. And it feels really good to be able to manifest some of that amazing flow and brightness. The other thing that I want to say to you is to be able to have a quick centering. So I took you through the long centering several times. The short one, my Aikido teacher, Satomi Sensei, once was teaching a workshop, and he was frustrated because first we were too stiff. He showed us what he wanted, then we were too sloppy. And his English wasn't great. He was trying to find the words, and he said these three things. He said, I want to see you're noble. I want to see you're awesome. I want to see you're shiny. And that's become our tagline, noble, awesome, and shiny. And it's a very quick centering. Noble, uplifted, awesome is the expansion, and shiny is the warmth. So what I encourage you to do is do that. You can also do a 1 second or 2 second centering. We call it a lizard push-up because one of my clients said she couldn't sustain that sense of centered state. And I said, you don't have to sustain it. Just do a few seconds. And she said, like a lizard push-up. And lizards are so cute. If you see them, they do this thing. And you can actually go, and it's like, we will rock you.
Nice.
And so we joke sometimes, just a lizard push-up, just ding for 1 second. If you keep doing that, you get used to being more bright, more open, more uplifted, more shiny. And then your coaching gives a transmission because of limbic resonance and because of mirror neurons. If you're bright and shiny and open, your clients will pick that up. And then whatever you're communicating to them, they'll be able to receive it more easily. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you found some value. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me through our website.
For more information on Wendy Palmer, you can go to www.leadershipembodiment.com.
Some ways to get more, to give back, and to get more involved now. So the biggest request I have would be to share the podcast with your friends, people that you think would really enjoy it. Email it to them, put it on your social media, tell them about it, old school. Really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support us financially, you can go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/embodiment podcast and give us $1 an episode. And I'd say they're well worth $1. So that's less than £1 if you're in UK-ish. So yeah, please go there. On the embodifacilitator.com website is where this is hosted. If most people I think listen to for iTunes. iTunes, we'd certainly appreciate a review. The way iTunes works means that a review means more people will find it. iTunes regards it as more important for searches. So even a couple of sentences review really does help as a little thank you to us. And if you want to go to embodifacilitator.com, you can see the actual, links to the sites. There's comments on there. The Facebook group tends to be where people discuss things. So if you go to put in the Embodiment Podcast into Facebook, there's a page which is relatively quiet and a group which does have some discussion on. So I will reply to things personally there. So also on embodifacilitator.com website, there's all sorts of freebies there. There's videos, there's free ebooks, there's ebooks you can buy. And of course, there's our newsletter list. If you want to stay in touch and learn about things like the Embodied Facilitator course and our next Embodied Yoga Principles teacher training, then go to that website and you'll see a little pop-up and you can get the newsletter through there. Okay, so I think they're the main ones. Tell your friends, pay us some money on Patreon, give us a review on iTunes, send us your email if you want to be on the newsletter list, and get involved on the Facebook there. Bit long. Pick whatever you like that works for you.
Till next time, welcome home to the body.